Uh, just let me know when you're ready to start.
Hi, sorry about the delay, everybody. My internet went out, but I was able to connect via my phone. So please let me know if you can't hear or see me.
That's great. I was about to jump in on your behalf, but I'm now going to jump out and hand it right back to you. That's why we've already started. So we're live
Wonderful.
right now, just so you know.
Thank you.
And we are now live vice chair, so you can go right ahead. I don't think we can hear you.
There we go. Thank you. So I have the information that you sent here. I'm just bringing it up, and thanks for your patience. Sorry, folks, if I look squinty. Just trying to do all this from a little screen. Oh, shoot, it won't open up. Sorry, someone hit the telephone pole in front of my apartment and our internet and everything's been whacked.
Let's give it a second if you want to hand it over to for a bit.
Thank you.
But
It's just starting to come up now.
Perfect.
Ah, here we go. Okay. Okay, so we have called to order, and have we done the land acknowledgement?
I'm shaking my head, but you're on a phone. Sorry, the answer is no. We had literally just gone live.
Okay, and thank you, Ray. I appreciate your support through this. So the meeting is called to order at 4:38 p.m. on March 2nd, or 2023. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. I'd like, if possible, all members to introduce themselves and check if their camera and audio are working. I'll start with myself, Carlin O'Hanley, Vice Chair.
I'll go next, Sandra Nowlin, member from last year.
My name is Ted Doan. I'm a new member.
I'm Ryan Frizzell. I'm also a new member.
I'm Mu Yusha, also a new member. Nice to meet you.
Hey, I'm Chris Poole, Superintendent of Parks for HRM.
Ian Kennedy, Supervisor of Major Parks for HRM.
I think Dominic was muted, so go ahead.
Okay. Dominic Johns, new member.
Way Mason, counselor, longest serving member, because the counselor is always on the committee. So 10 years now, and nice to see you all today.
Thank you, everyone. Our chair is not present today. And so the meeting has been sent over. Well, that's why I'm running the meeting right now. And as you can all tell, this is my first time doing so. So I'm trying to stick to the script, also smile at you all and read. So right now we're going to call for nominations for the position of chair. And this requires a mover and a seconder. Do I have someone to move this motion?
I would like to nominate Carlin if she'll accept it.
I would love to accept that. Do we have a seconder?
I would second.
Okay.
Thank you, Ted, and welcome. Okay, well then, because we have nominated someone. I believe that perhaps, I'm just checking here. I believe that's all we need. That seems quite simple.
Chair, if I could just for a second.
Hmm.
So since you've accepted the nomination, we would also need a mover and a seconder for that. And then afterwards, you would need to call for more nominations 3 more times. And if there are none, then you would be the successful chair.
So I think that I nominated and Ted seconded. So I think we're at 3 calls for any further nominations.
Okay, then we would just need a motion to appoint Carlin as the chair of Point Pleasant Park Advisory Committee.
So moved.
I would also need a seconder, please.
I'll second that, Sandra Nowlin.
Thanks, Lama, and thanks, Sandra.
And we would need the call for a vote, and then I can officially appoint you as the chair. Sorry.
I wasn't sure. Okay, so next we'd like to call a vote for all members of the Point Pleasant Park Advisory Committee that are present today. All members that are in favor, say aye.
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 And all favors against, all those against, please say nay.
Okay, perfect. Then Carlin, you are now the chair of the Point Pleasant Park Advisory Committee. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm super excited. So thanks, everybody. And in that timing, I was also able to get the internet back on my computer. So I'm going to be switching over there soon too. Okay. So now that's our first bit of business. We're going to move on. We have quorum, we've done this. Now we're going to move on to election of vice chair. And so how we're going to do that, the new chair will run the, so that's me. So I encourage anyone that's interested to maybe send a signal and someone will nominate you. And from there, once someone is nominated, we then have a seconder who moves that motion, and then we vote just like we did for me. Is anyone interested in being vice chair? Yeah, I agree with you, Wei. I was going to ask Sandra, are you interested in this role?
I suppose I could be persuaded.
Allow me to persuade you by nominating Sandra Nolan for vice chair.
I'll second that.
Oh, okay, excellent. Second, and so then so now we have a nomination for Sandra for vice chair. And now can we take a vote? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
If I can just interject, Chair, I'm sorry. Sandra, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I will accept the nomination.
Okay, and Chair, I would need you to call 3 more times for any further nominations. And if there are none, you would put a motion for Sandra to be appointed as the vice chair, and that would require a mover and a seconder.
Okay, so I would like to ask again if there are any other nominations for vice chair. And then I would also like to ask if there's any other nominations for the position of vice chair for the Point Pleasant Park Advisory Committee. I'm just looking in the chat. And then I'm looking at our list of attendance so that I don't forget anybody. We have a pretty new crew with us. So nobody else is interested, then I'm going to move or request that we move this to a vote for Sandra.
So I'll move that Sandra be appointed vice chair.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ted. Lemma, are we good to go ahead and vote now?
Yes, you're good to go.
Thank you. All those in favor of Sandra Nolan as vice chair, please say aye.
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 All those against, please say nay. Excellent. Congratulations, Sandra, and thank you, everyone else. You are now vice chair for the next year.
You'll have to brief me on my responsibilities.
No worries. And everyone's pretty nice. So if we miss something, we usually help each other out, which is nice.
Excellent.
Okay, now I'm moving on. We're just flying through our tasks tonight. Okay, it carries as amended. Approval. So now we're going to approve the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. So
If I could interject, Chair, I'm sorry. We have the approval of the minutes of December 1st, 2022 first.
Thank you so much. I scrolled right over that. That's number 2. So are there any errors or any omissions from the minutes on December 1st that anyone noticed? And if not, I will call for a motion to approve the minutes from December 1st. And I require a mover and a seconder, please.
I'll move that.
Thank you. And if there's any questions on this, please jump in, because I know this is a lot to digest for our first meeting. Okay, do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Okay, so all these in favor signify by A or I or nay. Aye.
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 Okay. And now we'll be on the minutes from December 1st have been approved. Thank you. So that motion was carried and there are no changes that are made. So we don't have to defeat it. Number 3, back to the approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. So I would like to know if there's any requests for any additions, deletions, or changes to the order of business. And that if you're unsure of what the order is, just flip on over to the agenda that was sent out.
Chair, there is one deletion today, which is item 9, motions of recession, December 1st, 2022. And there will also be a notice of motion by Councillor Mason coming forward at the end of the meeting. So
item 12.1.
Yes, that would be the notice of motion. The deletion would be item 9.1. And so since there is a deletion, you would approve the agenda as amended.
Yes. And then, and can I please have a move? I'd like to make a motion to approve the order of business as amended. And then can we have a mover and a seconder for this, please?
So moved.
Thank you. Seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposition? Okay. So other than those two changes, we're going to move forward and approve the order of business. Moving forward, we're going to move to number 4. There's no business that's come out of the minutes other than those two changes that we just highlighted. And are there any conflicts of interest? So maybe we could have those that have been involved with this a little longer than I have kind of lead this part. But are there any conflicts of interest? And if so, please speak up now. I'm not sure what we would be in conflict with though. Wei?
So a conflict is if you are going to benefit financially, or someone you're related to is going to benefit financially, or in some kind of material way. So, the joke the mayor made once when you were debating sidewalk funding that he uses sidewalks, that is not in fact a conflict. We all use the park. We love the park. That's not a conflict. So,
okay. So as of now, based on our agenda and what we're going to speak about, I don't have any conflicts of interest. And if anyone does, raise or speak up now, or we can move on. So now we're going to go to deferred business, and that's 6.1 from the agenda. So we're going to ask Ian Kennedy and Chris Poole to talk on this matter. And this is going to be the discussion of emergency phones and kiosk removal and replacement. Thank you.
Yeah, I can speak first on this. What we did is we looked at a basic traffic study given to us by Bell over the last 3 months to see what kind of usage there was for the emergency phone system that's in the park currently. And what we're finding is the data is unreliable at best, but the phone lines that are in there, of which there were five spots originally that had their own individual numbers, of which there looks to be only one that's functioning correctly, or at least working to any degree. The 3-month period that we looked at basically indicated to us that there were no incidents in the park in the last year that had resulted in an emergency event where somebody had used these phones. Some data shows calls with no minutes, as well as calls logged with minutes and no call itself. So some of this stuff has to be taken with a grain of salt, because I don't think the data is very accurate. From what I'm hearing, Ian spoke with one of the officers that takes the calls, and primarily what they're finding is that it's just somebody passing by the phone kiosk, which is a push button event that's being pushed, and really for no reason other than to push it. So what we're finding is there's also a lot of data showing incoming calls to those, of which I don't quite understand. Those must be wrong number calls to those numbers. That's the only thing that makes sense. So the bulk of the data, it seems, if there's usage at all, it tends to be between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. Monday to Friday. The integrity, like I said, is questionable, the data. Large majority of the activity is all on the one, it's a 4905501 number. unsure of the location of that kiosk, but I assume it's next to the main parking lot. The longest single outgoing call was stated as 38 minutes. And the longest single incoming call was 10. So the data seems hard to interpret, with 4 of the phone lines seemingly not functional, and the cost of replacements for stringing new phone infrastructure through the park. It doesn't seem fiscally responsible for parks operations to be putting new phone lines and new phone systems into the new kiosk locations. Those locations will be primarily wayfinding maps and information on a sign itself. And with the technology today, where virtually everybody in the park has a phone in their pocket, and there's any hundreds of phones in the park at any given time, we're looking to not replace the infrastructure itself and just go with the maps and wayfinding instead. I don't know, Ian, if you have anything more to add to that.
I can just add that, yeah, was talking to the local constable and then testing the phones myself. Through talking to the operator, they said most of the calls are, like Chris stated, one-offs or aren't related to an emergency at all. And most instances of an emergency seem to be going directly to police through 911 or the non-emergency number, which is what I was told from the constable who operates around this area after hours. And he said in most cases, the emergencies or calls that come into him, by the time he's in the park, they're either resolved or no longer present. And in those instances, those aren't coming from the kiosks whatsoever. So, and I had looked into what the prices for even repairs for fixing them as well. And it doesn't, yeah, as Chris said, it's not fiscally feasible or appropriate to do. But other than that, that's all that I can add.
You're muted, Carla.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you, Chris. I have a few questions, but before I ask mine, does anybody else have any questions? Ted, please go ahead.
Just a quick question. So is there any thought given to perhaps just having one phone available, perhaps near the main parking lot? And also, I do agree with the fact there are people with a lot more mobile phones, and it would be even more dangerous if people are approaching phones and you trying to use them if they don't work. That could cause problems.
Yeah, I mean, we could look into costs of putting a single phone somewhere near a major parking lot. I'm not sure that it's needed. They tend to attract vandalism and also unwanted behavior. It would be better, in my opinion, not to have one in the park at all, similar to all the other parks in HRM.
One thing I will add too is I believe there is still a payphone near the bus stop in the upper parking lot, which, I mean, in the event of emergency, could act as a phone line. And one thing I wanted to mention as well is we have a landline in the park office that during operational hours, we quite often, with direct emergencies, whatever is involving injury or someone's dog or lost items or someone is lost in the park, we receive a lot of calls to the office that either myself or staff or my lead hand answer. So in situations of emergency, a majority of the time, they reach us before they reach the outside. So we still have that between 7 to 3. There's the number that people can call here
My question, and thank you. My question is two-part. Can we keep the phones, or is there a problem, or is there something I'm not seeing by keeping the traditional phones, the telephones, where they are? If one is broken, not fix it, but the one that is working, that's by the bus stop, if it is working, keep it there. The reason I'm suggesting that is I'm thinking about budgets, costs, and then also work orders. And I'm sure all of us in our own daily work know how slow things are moving. So I'm wondering if we keep them, because I've heard that a fair amount of people like to see an old phone, that it's something nice. Or there's also the concept that people are doing in different parks where they're setting up a telephone, like an old receiver, but it doesn't work. And it's an option to call people that are no longer with us. Now, again, I'm throwing something else in the mix, but where I'm coming from here is maybe let them be until they're at a place where they're an eyesore or causing a problem, like dangerous, like if the parts are broken, and that kind of thing, but otherwise maybe leave them. What does anyone think?
Ian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they are all just a push button, are they not?
Yeah, I would liken them to, I would call them an intercom. They're just a metal plate with a single flush button, and that's it. And then you click it. It's like if you were in a apartment complex lobby. That's it. It's just a plate with 3 lines for a grate, and you press it. And the one that does work, a dial tone starts, and someone says, 911 non-emergency. What is your issue? But it's the kind of thing where, yeah, they don't stay. If you know they're there, you know they're there. But if you've never looked for them, you likely wouldn't notice unless you were looking for them, because they're probably about 5 inches by 5 inches square, little metal plate on the kiosk.
Oh,
And
okay.
It's also not a matter of keeping something there, because they're all going to be removed when the kiosks go. The phone intercom systems and lines that are there will be removed along with them. So anything, it would be a whole new set of infrastructure if something was to go back in.
I don't think they hold a purpose like they once did.
No, I would agree. Like years ago when nobody had phones, I think that they were a valuable asset to have in a large park like that, where, people could essentially even just get lost. But I think this day and age, they're obsolete.
I would agree with Chris.
So I have a question for Lama, and I see Krista lurking. What does the committee do now? Do we make a motion, or is this merely for information?
So you could make a motion if you'd like to, asking for a staff report, or it could be for your own information. And if you'd like to think it over, you can always make a motion at the next meeting.
So to me, I'm not hearing anybody strongly coming out saying we got to keep the phones. And if we can avoid tasking staff with another staff report, because it consumes a tremendous amount of time to do things that, we've already heard this. I would say we just leave it and we can move on to the next item. Carlin's, you're muted too.
I would agree with that.
Carlin, did you manage to catch the end of that?
I can't hear anyone anymore.
Hello,
Can you hear
Carl.
me?
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I was like, I could see your folks' mouths moving, but I couldn't hear you. And then everyone froze. I agree. I agree, and I think that that would be the best way to proceed. So do we have to vote on that, Lama?
You don't need to vote. You can just proceed if everyone is okay with not making a motion. There doesn't need to be a vote.
Are we all comfortable with that?
Yes, I am.
I'm good with that.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. We're moving through. Yes, everyone, my camera's off now so that you don't have to deal with any difficulty or interruptions on my end. Okay, so then we're to the next, and we've had the order for questions speak. So now we're going to move to correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Lama, are there any correspondence, or is there any correspondence that you need to bring to our attention?
There was no correspondence received by the clerk's office.
Thank you. Now 7.2 petitions. Are there any petitions, Lama, that need to be brought to attention?
There were no petitions received by the clerk's office.
Okay, thank you. Now we are going to get ready for a presentation from Pam James with the Orienteering Association of Nova Scotia. We're happy to invite you, Pam, to make a presentation. And I'd like to remind all applicants that there are 10 minutes to present. Our members are permitted to only ask questions for clarification. The committee as a group cannot debate the subject matter of the presentation, just so that everybody's in the know. And
sorry, this is Pam. When I was being switched to panelists, I kind of lost you for a bit, so I didn't catch the last little bit you said.
No worries. So I was just saying that we're welcoming you to make your presentation. There will be 10 minutes to present, and that our members of the advisory committee are only to ask questions for clarification. We are unable to debate any subject matter on your presentation. That's all.
Okay. So just out of curiosity, how does a decision get made? I'll continue. I'll start with my presentation and then you can let me know. Okay, so I'm Pam. I'm a member of the Orienteering Association of Nova Scotia. Thank you for letting me speak with you today. Essentially, what the association would like to know is if we can start orienteering in Point Pleasant Park again, and if so, what are the procedures and the requirements to do so? So orienteering is an activity where participants travel on foot using a map to navigate from various points, which we call checkpoints, called controls, in a natural area with no set route. So this means we are on trail and also through the woods off trail as well. To properly orienteer in an area, it is necessary for us to map the area to specific standards. And these maps are very detailed and very costly to make. So having to create these maps is a large capital investment for us as a provincial sport and rec association. So we want to obtain permission for prior use to make sure that we can, you know, if we want to invest in making a map, we want to be able to use it. The first orienteering event in Nova Scotia was held in Point Pleasant Park, and that was in 1970. We had lots of events at the time, and so then Hurricane Juan came along, and travel off trail was prohibited. So it makes so we can't orienteer, because part of the orienteering is running on trail, but also is navigating and finding your way, and you cut through the woods, and there's locations you find in the woods. So, and it's been 20 years, I think, since Juan. So we just want to inquire to see if it's now possible to orienteer in the park. The environmental impacts, we use it maybe once or twice a year. Usually we don't have many more than, 30 to 70 people. They're not all going the same way, the same place. There are checkpoints, so they might congregate around one little area, but not everyone goes to the same location. And people on the beginner's course will mainly be on trails, whereas the more advanced people would be cutting through the woods. We put out what we call controls, 3-sided orange and white flags, and they get put out the morning of the event, and we retrieve them at the end of the event. I submitted a map at the bottom of the document, and I just wanted to show that we can mark an area out of bounds if there is a sensitive area within the park that people don't want us to go. If there's a plant that needs saving, what have you. And so there can be a little bit of impact with us going through, but usually it doesn't last for very long. There's a link in my document to information on environment and sustainability. Thank you for your consideration. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer. I wanted to keep it brief, and I can explain more if anything, if you want.
How often might you be doing this over the course of a year?
Well, just once or twice. We have other areas that we compete in.
This is Ted. I'm just wondering if the tree trimming that's been occurring, if that would create problems for the participants.
So the maps are very detailed. So one of the things that gets maps is the thickness of the vegetation. So I went for a run in the park about a month ago, I guess, and I noticed that where you've trimmed the trees, it's just been left on the ground, which would make it difficult to go through. So that would be marked on the map as visible but difficult to get through. So we have different shades of green. So the darker the green, the thicker the vegetation. So if you have a look at the map that I submitted, there's very little green on the map, but just looking from what I could see from the trail, the park would be a lot greener just because of the ingrowth of vegetation, because there haven't been people in the area or the clearing that was done. Oh, yeah. So, you can see just at the north, there's just a few sections of green, but really a lot of that map will be green, and white signifies what we call runnable terrain. So easy to get through, terrain. And some of the areas I think now are quite what we call green or thick, that people aren't going to want to go through them. It'll be much faster for them to go around. But if you notice the black dots on the map, those are boulders and cliff features, rock features, etc. And they're just interesting features to go to.
I really like this idea. I think it would be great to have, let's say, to lean back on those organized activities that were occurring in the park. Yeah, so I think it's going to only amplify the use of the park, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, I mean, this is the past, but I know back in the late 70s and 80s, the school groups used to have an event in the park. And so it was widely used and quite a bit for orienteering. I mean, we don't have that on our agenda at the moment, but it's just nice to have a place within the Peninsula of Halifax that's a nice place to go.
Yeah, I remember when there was a fair amount of orienteering in our different parks, whether it was over in Dartmouth and Shuby or that, and I don't know, as someone with a background in education, I think it would be great for the community to see as well because of where the park is located. It's also a positive and healthy use of the park. And then I feel it could reinforce just another sense of community that we're trying to foster, especially after so many years of just us all being at home and that. That's how I feel. What does anybody else think?
I agree. I think the park is safe for the less experienced people who are involved. I think it's a wonderful, activity to do there. I would think this is the normal use of the park. This would be the kind of thing that you'd expect the park to be used for.
I guess we just had, at one time, we were just told that we were not allowed off trail. And so, that was sort of one of the key things that we were, making sure that we can do that.
Back in the 80s, I was in one of those school groups that did the orienteering at the park. And I don't remember much about the orienteering, but it was great to explore the park as a young child that way. I think it's a great idea.
So for me, I think next meeting asking for a staff report about orienteering would be a good move. I'm going to be the Debbie Downer. I have two concerns. One is I know that with what do they call it? I just went right in my head. Not BMX bikes, mountain biking. When that became a big thing, that was really damaging to the park off trail. And so it might have been that all these off trail things got banned at the same time. Doesn't mean they have to stay banned. But I do know on the northwest side, the second thing is on the Northwest Arm side, there's a number of sensitive heritage areas, especially with the Mi'kmaq, that we would probably want to put an exclusion around on the maps. And those are the kind of things that, frankly, we didn't consider in the 70s and have only really come to light since around 2008, since WAN, when they did the Mi'kmaq heritage plan for the park. So I think that's the kind of thing we'd have to ask staff to bring together in a review. And that probably wouldn't be as fast as you'd think, because those kind of things are often a little buried. Pardon the unintended pun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to ask this question as well. What other parks are you entertaining doing this in throughout HRM this year?
We've used Hemlock and Fleming Park and Shuby Park in the past. Long Lake, potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, the only concerns that I have from an operational point of view would be, interactions with off-leash animals and also damage to flora and fauna where you're going off trail. That's the only real two concerns that I see. And that would be just a conversation we'd have to have with staff.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you, as I said, we can block off if there are areas that are particularly sensitive that we can make sure that people don't go to. Because, yeah, true. The off leash issue, we don't like being chased by dogs any more than anyone else does. And so we respect that. And so I think it'd be a matter of, trying to find times that, maybe most of the population isn't out and about at that particular time. But having said that, if we organized an event, it gets advertised. And so if we're having it on June 3rd or whatever, then it doesn't matter if it's raining, snowing, or whatever, we would still plan to host the event on that day. So we can't sort of say, oh, well, let's pick a rainy day because no one will be out.
How many people typically show up for an event?
We usually get sort of 30 to 60, and then there's anywhere between 3 and 7 different classes. So if you have a beginner's course, then they tend to be all along the trail. And then if you have an intermediate level course, then there's more route choices, so more decision making as to which way you're going to go, but it's not necessarily that much. You're not running off trail all that much. It's more the advanced people. So I would say, I don't know, maybe 30% of our competitors are in the advanced category.
How long would the event last?
So typically, I mean, we have to set up, because there's control features. So you set our control points, you set them up in the morning. So often we have 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock start. So if it's a 10 o'clock, for example, start, then people would out probably by 8 o'clock putting the controls out. Probably the race would probably be maybe an hour or two, and then someone would go out and pick up the flags. So 6 hours maybe.
One question I have, when you are taking on these events and doing these events like you've done in Shubie and Hemlock, are you going through like an official booking process through HRM? Because it's like, from my position, like a lot of people enter Point Pleasant Park during the day, but to have 30 to potentially 90 people show up and taking part in a kind of a not isolated, but an event like that, I would feel more comfortable with it going through the channels of the proper booking process, more for awareness and of what's going on and when, and to prepare for it from an operational standpoint.
Yes, and I mean, that was part of my question. What is the official process, and what do we need to do, and who do we need to contact, and what sort of, like, if I decided I wanted to have an event next week, would that be possible, or do you need a month? Do you need 2 months? Like, what's the time frame for that? And I guess
with regards to those, like, the earlier the better, just in case it does conflict with anything in the park regulations and bylaw, and then it would give the people who do the booking time to get things in order, for, like, say you would need a parking pass or something, and then to run that by with the bookings, then they can officially run that by staff on what our opinion is.
So can I ask this of staff, if I may, Carlin? So Ian, those are really good points. And I also suspect that orienteering being told you can't use the park anymore may not have been so much as a policy as a practice, right? So perhaps what we should do, as we've had a presentation from the public about an issue, would be if staff can take that away and just check with booking, would they even entertain this? And if you can bring that to the next Point Pleasant Park meeting, maybe we don't need to make a motion. But if there's still a policy on the books, though I suspect it was probably from the era where that practice was written on a piece of paper in somebody's desk who was retired, which happens a lot in the city. It's amazing, like the difference between how things are run now and how they were run in the past is stark, right? And our staff wouldn't do that now. That's the mac and cheese is done. Yeah, if staff could bring that back, then that would forestall having to make any kind of motion. But it could be that a motion is required to have a discussion about changing a policy. I doubt it, but we could find out.
Thank you, Ray.
That's something we can discuss and come back to at the next meeting. I don't know of, like, we don't have signage in the park that says no off trail. I don't know of any specific policy that says no off trail. It's more of a safety discretion. A lot of people are probably already orienteering on their own in the park as individuals or in small groups. So we're not actively seeking those people out or monitoring for people off trail. But at the same time, rarely in the park do we see people off trail. As you said, like, only experienced people would probably choose to do that, which is, I think it is better to have someone experienced going off trail than someone potentially getting lost and or injured. But definitely something we can discuss and with in regards to booking. But I don't know if there's any solid regulation or policy that says no off trail.
That would be great info to have, and we could forestall yet another staff report if you can bring that next meeting.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, because I know that it distinguishes like off leash trails and that kind of thing, but I don't, the last time I was there, I didn't notice, but I also wasn't looking.
Right. Yeah. There's no, there are some trails that are foot trails that are unofficial trails, that have just been created over time through traffic. So there's no signage in here that says you can't go off trail.
Okay, so then I think, unless anybody else has any other questions, what we're going to need to do is make a motion that this will be brought forward to the next meeting. However, at the same time, meanwhile, we've also asked for a staff report to come to the next meeting. And so the next meeting, we can vote on this. And from there, we will be able to share the next stages with Pam. Am I correct? Lama?
You don't need to make a motion right now. So basically what was already done is that as a committee, you've notified staff that this is what you would like to look into for the next meeting. So when we are preparing the agenda for the next meeting, this will be factored in. And if a motion needs to be made, it will be made at the next meeting. So you can, if you have any more questions, this is the time to ask the questions. But if you folks have all the information you need, you can just move on to the next agenda item.
Okay, let me see, 5:14.
So I just need to, will you want me at the next meeting then? No, you'll just send me a report of what you've just found out and decide then? Is that how that works?
We can update you on what the next steps will be after the next meeting, and you can always watch the meeting virtually because they are streamed on YouTube as well. So you can find all that information on the halifax.ca website once the meeting information is posted, which is usually a week before the meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, Emma knows how to get in touch with me. So if anyone has any questions. Thank you
for listening. So much. Thank you, and we'll talk soon. Take care.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, now we're going to move on Path forward, there's no info. Motions of rescission. 9. So 9.1, Counselor Mason, motion to be circulated.
If
No,
I,
wait, they've been deleted. Sorry. We'll move to Point Pleasant Park operations update from Ian Kennedy and Chris Poole. Please.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm going to give a
Thanks.
parks update. I know we met pretty recently, and in terms of maintenance operations, things kind of they slow down in the winter due to the weather. But we've been keeping up with ongoing regular maintenance, which is litter pickup, road maintenance, and so forth. But in the winter, staff is mostly focused on plowing and salting. So a big focus this winter has been on, which is all year, but mostly this winter, on drainage and keeping the roads clear, because we've seen a lot of heavy rainfall, and with the state of the park and its drainage, keeping that standing water off the road has kind of been our focus this winter, both for public safety and for park infrastructure safety. Our drainage system can only function to a certain degree due to its age, and the better that the whole system functions as a whole, the better it is for the park and the people using the park. We did a lot of it in the fall due to Fiona, but we're still continuing with that, which is removing both invasive, aging, and damaged trees. Staff arborist finds it a lot easier in the winter to do that, both for safety reasons and visibility, and also it's much easier to fell trees. So we've continued with a lot of work on that through the winter, both in tandem with park staff and urban forestry, who've been able to help us remove trees that are out of our operational control due to safety reason or heights, stuff close to power lines and so forth. So that has been our main focus this winter. As I said, things are, when you move into the winter months and the weather comes around, and with a lot of the vegetation dying down, most of our focus is on keeping the park safe for recreational use during winter weather. From a staff perspective, we're still in a staff shortage due to reasons out of our control, but that's okay. We're plugging along and we keep on trucking. We did have a co-op student for the first time this winter from J.L. Ilsley High School, which I don't know if it was a first for parks, but it was a first for here at Major Parks. We usually have students in the summer, but we've never had a student off season in the winter. And it proved to be a good experience, both for the student and the high school and our operation. I feel like working in a parks and recreation environment is a pretty beneficial and high skill building experience for someone in high school. So that just ended. And we've also taken on another co-op student once or twice who's also working in another department to fill operational demands. So we benefited from that and hope to keep that avenue open for years to come, either through JL Ilsley or them communicating with other high schools, because it was, again, I guess kind of a win-win experience. So we're moving into the summer now, where we will be back to full staff with our seasonal staff, which will help us meet operational needs. But unfortunately, this summer, we are not going to have our student staff due to budgetary reasons, which is unfortunate, but we've been in that situation in the past, especially in summer 2020, amidst the lockdown. We didn't have students in the park that year for obvious reasons, but we were still able to meet operational demands then. And we don't foresee too big of a setback in that regard this year. And then moving on to stuff that we are working on or going to complete in the oncoming year. We spoke of this in previous meetings, but it's being implemented as we speak. I met with them a few times over the last few weeks. NASCAD is now working and moving towards the installation and placement of their art projects in the park. So you will see those in for a 2 to 3 week period come April. They'll be scattered all over the park, on the shoreline, in trees. I sat on a committee and discussed to make sure nothing that was going in the park was going to both impede the public or be unsafe or damage anything from a biodiversity perspective. All of them are quite interesting and pretty, I would say, zero to low. I'm not going to use the word damage, but low. Yeah, let's just do that. Low damage. They're not gonna have a lasting effect on the park, especially after being in place for 3 weeks. One thing we're doing, there is a trail that currently exists beside the pumping station on Cable Road, just by the washrooms near Chain Rock Battery. It was created by Halifax Water to install a manhole on the shoreline in Northwest Arm. A lot of people see it as a path because it does look like a path, but technically it isn't an official path, and it runs across private land that has just recently been bought. So to prevent any sort of liability or confusion with that property owner, we've discussed with them to decide that we're going to, and Halifax Water takes no responsibility for it anymore, unfortunately. So we're going to fill that in and let it regrow to avoid the confusion that it is a path that leads to the shoreline. It is an unmaintenanced path anyway, so having it removed is in basically everybody's best interest. We had some damage in some storms over the winter. We're getting a new light fixture replaced in the lower parking lot sometime soon. You may have seen it in the accessible pad down there. The culvert was replaced on Sailors Memorial Way between Heather Road and, Prince of Wales Road, my mistake, and Black Rock Beach. It has proven better than the previous culvert, but due to some issues with the heavy storm surge we've seen this year and will likely continue to see, working with them to install a grate system on the end that'll prevent even further setbacks in terms of the culvert clogging, overflowing, but make it easier from a staff perspective for maintenance to have that grate be able to be removed and to prevent inflow from the shoreline further clogging the culvert. It'll just lead to a more effective culvert. I mentioned this before, but we're en route to do that. We had some barrier damage in the lower parking lot. Someone had had an automotive incident and damaged one of the barriers when it was locked last year. So we're having that repaired and installing another barrier up in the upper parking lot. It won't be on a scheduled locking timeline through commissionaires like the lower parking lots. It'll more be there for a maintenance purpose. So say we have, God forbid, another hurricane come, we'll be able to properly keep the park closed for maintenance issues and safety reasons. And in the instance that say we get a large amount of snowfall, we'll be able to have that parking lot closed off to properly implement snow removal processes. Going forward as well, we've mentioned this before, we're getting speed bumps installed in the lower parking lot to reduce damage and speeding. There's a lot of car activity there in the summer, and which is fine to have car shows there and people showing up with their cars, but there's also a lot of people who are driving a little too fast, which is we've received quite a few complaints about. We are constantly focusing on roadwork, but we're going to be putting a pretty big focus on it this summer, both because the roads need extensive material and regrading, because I don't think they've gotten an extensive material and regrade in over a decade. So we're going to be focusing on that, both for operational needs and because the NAIG is happening in the park in July. So we're going to make sure that the roads, especially in the area that the race is happening on, from a staff perspective, they're going to be putting focus on keeping those roads in good shape to make for a good race for the runners, but also make it safe for the runners as well. And on my last note here, I'd said that the thinning project is going forward this year, but it is also, it is not happening in 2023. It has been pushed ahead to 2024, unfortunately. Sorry for my mistake, due to budgetary reasons as well. That's all I have to say for operational updates at this time, and I leave the floor open to anyone who has any questions.
This is Ted. I have a question. So first, First of all, just to comment, as a park user, the plowing's been outstanding this winter. Just have to let you know that.
Thank you.
You mentioned the culvert project. So when you enter the park near where the old canteen used to be in the lower parking lot, there's a grate that's a little bit questionable when you walk in near Black Rock Beach. Is that the grate you're referring to? With respect to that project?
No, I know which one you're talking about. Yeah, that's a pretty old service grate. That is one. There's a bunch of grates and culverts throughout the park that basically, when we know it's raining, or when we know it's going to rain, when we know it's going to rain or rain is in the forecast, we kind of have a system where all those are checked and maintenance, and due to the age of some of them, they have to be checked on mid-storm. So that is one that is definitely high priority when we're in a storm. But the one I'm referring to is just past Black Rock Beach, when you're passing the kind of picnic area into the park and the beach, and you pass the large jutting rock that comes out past Black Rock Beach, Black Rock, right before Prince of Wales Road. There's kind of I wouldn't go as far as to call it a swamp, but it's a lower damp area, and there's a culvert that runs under the road, straight under the grass, under the shoreline and out to the ocean, and that is the main drainage point for over a third of the park right there. So the culvert there, we were spending a lot of time on maintenance with that because it would flood in small rainfalls. It's only seen flooding once this year, but that was during a period where we got something like 60 to 70 millimeters over 2 days, and we had also seen a thaw. So fortunately, situationally, that was kind of out of our control. Yeah, it's kind of that low area right before Prince of Wales that looks out towards Shearwater.
Yeah, okay, I know the spot exactly. There's quite a bit of water comes through there. If there's any opportunity in the future, certainly, budget and time, that grate near the entrance is an area I see a lot of people kind of sidestepping or jumping over to kind of get through to the trails there.
Yes, good point.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Ian and Chris.
You're welcome.
Okay, we've asked, they've spoke, we've had our questions. Now we're at added items. There are no added items for today's meeting or notices of motion, but now we're going to come to 12.1 and ask Councillor Mason to speak on this, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to give a notice of motion, and then unlike our normal practice, I'm going to explain it a little bit since we have so many new folks. So take notice that at the Point Pleasant Park Advisory Committee, the Point Pleasant Park Advisory Committee rescind item 9.2.1 from December 1st, 2022, the Point Pleasant Park Advisory Committee meeting, which requested a staff report as follows: that the Point Pleasant Park Advisory Committee recommends that the Halifax and West Community Council direct the Chief Administrative Officer to prepare a staff report evaluating the possible reinstatement of dedicated park patrol in Point Pleasant Park. So when you do a notice of motion, that's so it's public that we're going to discuss something later, and the notice has been given. So 2 months from now, we'll discuss it so the general public can hear about it. And we had it originally on the agenda today to potentially suspend the rules and debate it just today. But because so many of you are new, at the last minute, I said, we should just not do that and give everybody a chance to think about it. And normally we would just discuss that entirely at the next meeting. But I will say that this was because staff, after we made the motion in December, they went and looked, and there's already a plan to do some compliance officer park patrol stuff. That's already in train. And so asking for them to write a staff report on that is just going to bog down staff time. So they'll speak to that when we get to the next meeting, but I just thought it would be good to use this as an illustration of what a notice of motion is. And you all can make notices of motion as well, though I strongly advise that you talk to LAMA and potentially park staff before you actually put them on the floor, because it's always good to make sure they're exactly written right to get what you want. So anyway, that's the explanation of what that is. There's no debate and it doesn't need a seconder. It's just a notice of something that's going to happen in the future.
Thank you. And I think that's helpful. I know I can find all of the motions and seconding and processes we do a little confusing. Well, the next meeting of the Point Pleasant Park Advisory Committee will be held on May 4th, 2023. It's set out in the committee's approved meeting schedule for 2023. And I will ask for a motion to adjourn. So we require a mover to do so, please.
I so move, Sandra.
Sandra is the mover, and it is 5:47, and this meeting is adjourned.
Good job, everyone. Did it.